...2020 has been a pretty awful year for horror movies so far, but I can finally say...
We got one!
The Invisible Man stars Elizabeth Moss, Oliver Jackson Cohen, Aldous Hodge, and is directed by Leigh Whannell. You heard me right in the intro, we finally got ourselves a quality horror movie. That means the goose egg is gone. 2020, you are now 1 for 5. Go ahead and celebrate. You got yourself off the schneid. Way to go, you deserve it, you've earned it. But with that being said, even though I did thoroughly enjoy this movie, it wasn't without its little fair share of problems here and there, and I'll get to those in a little bit. But first, let me get into what this movie is actually about. Now, this ain't your granddaddy's Invisible Man movie from the 1930s. This movie is really, really different. And the only thing that's comparable and the only thing that is the same is the name of the movie. Now, the 1930s Invisible Man, starring Claude Rains, was about a scientist who goes crazy and has aspirations of dominating the world with his invisibility serum stuff. This version of the Invisible Man, however, is really just about a woman trying to get away from her crazy, abusive boyfriend. That's it. And without getting into any spoilers, there were quite a few scenes in this movie where it was really tense, or there was some that really caught me off guard. And one of the scenes is at a restaurant, and I'm not going to tell you what happens, but when it does happen, I was like, holy shit. Now, unlike the original, where Claude Rains as the mad scientist develops a serum that turns him invisible, the character Adrian in this movie builds a suit that turns him invisible. And if I'm being honest, that part of it seems a little too like comic booky, sci-fi. Not that that's bad or it's a detriment, but for me personally, I think I kind of like the mad scientist approach from the original movie. But I do have to give props to Elizabeth Moss's performance in this movie, because she knocks it out of the park. Her performance and her character is quite literally the lifeblood of this movie. If she doesn't deliver the performance that she does, the movie probably just stumbles and falls flat on its face. She does such a good job of portraying this character who is being mentally tormented and physically abused, and even in the subtleties of her acting, it's just phenomenal. She just does a phenomenal job. Her performance really does carry this movie. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with this movie, and there really wasn't too much in the way of negatives, but there were a few things that I did have little minor issues with. One of the little negatives I do have about this movie is that it is a little uneven at times, and especially in the very beginning. After the opening scene where Elizabeth Moss's character is actually running away from Adrian, the movie really slows down. And I'm not one that views slower paced horror movies as a negative. I love movies like The Witch or The Wicker Man that really take their time and build up atmosphere and build up tension. This one, however, after the brief little action-packed beginning, it really is slow, and it takes a while for the action to pick up. And I don't mean action in like the, action movie sense. What I mean is it just takes a while for the stuff to actually start happening that affects our main character, and it takes its time a little bit slower than I would like for it to build and build and build towards the climax. But once it starts building and the tension starts ramping up towards the climax, the pace of the movie does pick up, and it does get better from there on out. And I thought Adrian's whole scheme and plot as to why he's tormenting his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, I just thought that was really weak. The only explanation that's given in the movie is the fact that he's doing all this simply because she dumped him before he ever got a chance to dump her. Okay, and I'm not saying that that's not believable, but it's just seriously weak, in my opinion anyway. But there were also like little things in there with the actual story as it was going on that I noticed. And without getting into too much of a spoiler, one scene that kind of bothered me was towards the end when she's in the hospital and her boyfriend is attacking her, and then he's also attacking the guards that are trying to restrain her. Like, there's a moment where he's kicking the crap out of all these guards and his suit is glitching, so you could kind of see him at times, like he's phasing in and out. And she's laying on the ground and she has a gun right next to her, and she doesn't pick it up and just try to shoot him. That drove me nuts in the theater. I was sitting there like yelling to myself as quietly as I could, just shoot the guy. You have a gun, shoot him. It's little moments like that in movies like these, those little character decisions that annoy me, when you have something that would be so obvious that anybody would do and they just don't do it for the sake of padding out an extra 20 minutes for the end of this movie. But alright, that was a short and sweet review this week for The Invisible Man, and I'm excited that finally for the first time I can give a movie in 2020 the frickin' horns.
Don't mess with the bull, young man. You'll get the horns.
The Invisible Man is a fun, albeit at times uneven thriller. Moss's performance of a person being mentally tormented and falling to pieces is enough to keep the audience engaged through the really slow parts and invested all the way through to the end. But simply dismissing this movie as a mere remake, I feel is a pretty big disservice considering how vastly different it is. Moviegoers expecting something more akin to the original 30s film might be disappointed, but despite its flaws, I thought this movie was a satisfying thriller and well worth the price of admission. Well, it's all the time we have this week, freaks and geeks. What are your thoughts on The Invisible Man? Please post them below. As always, like, comment, and subscribe. Adios, and GTFO.